In 1963, Chrysler built a car that could run on diesel fuel, or kerosene, or jet fuel, or salad oil. In one famous public demonstration, the President of Mexico poured tequila into the gas tank, and the car drove away without complaint. The engine had 1/5 the moving parts of a regular V8. It needed no antifreeze, no oil changes for tens of thousands of miles, no warm-up in winter. Chrysler built 50 of these cars. They lent them for free to ordinary American families across the country to drive as everyday transportation. And then, 3 years later, Chrysler took 46 of them back and crushed them, set most of the wreckage on fire. The official explanation was paperwork. The real explanation involves a tax loophole and a great deal of corporate fear. This is the story of the Chrysler Turbine Car, the most radical American car ever offered to the public, and the strangest cover-up in Detroit's history. To understand the turbine car, you have to understand the era it was born into, the jet age, when America was convinced that everything was about to be powered by turbines. It is the late 1940s. World War II has just ended, and engineers across the Western world are coming home from a global crash course in jet engine technology. Aircraft turbines have proven themselves simple, smooth, almost vibration-free, capable of running for thousands of hours between overhauls. American culture absorbs this. Magazine covers depict turbine-powered trains, turbine-powered buses, turbine-powered everything. The piston engine, the noisy, complex, oily soul of the automobile for 50 years, is widely assumed by serious people to be a dead end. And inside Chrysler, an engineer named George Huebner Jr. is preparing to bet his career on that assumption. Huebner is the kind of obsessive Detroit produced in abundance in that era, an engineer who genuinely believes that the future of the automobile is the gas turbine, and he is willing to spend the rest of his working life proving it. Beginning in the late 1940s, Chrysler's gas turbine research program begins quietly building prototypes. The first turbine-powered Chrysler test cars run in the early 1950s. The fundamental appeal is simple. A piston engine has hundreds of moving parts: pistons, valves, camshafts, rocker arms, timing chains, water pumps. A gas turbine has a compressor, a combustion chamber, and a turbine wheel. That is essentially it. The promised list of advantages reads like an engineering fantasy. Dramatically fewer moving parts, multi-fuel capability because the engine simply needs anything combustible, no cooling system in the traditional sense, no warm-up required, smooth and nearly vibration-free operation, and theoretical service intervals stretching into territory piston engines could not approach. Through the 1950s, Chrysler builds successive generations of test cars. Each is faster, smoother, more efficient than the last. By the early 1960s, the engineering team, under Huebner's leadership, believes they are ready for the boldest move in the history of automotive testing. They will not just build a turbine car, they will give it to the public. In 1962, Chrysler announces the User Program. The plan, on paper, sounds like a generous publicity stunt. In practice, it is one of the most ambitious real-world engineering tests ever undertaken by a car manufacturer. Chrysler will build 50 turbine cars. They will be loaned, not sold, to roughly 200 ordinary American families in rotating 3-month periods across the country. Each family will use the car as their everyday transportation. They will commute in it, take it on vacation, drive children to school, and every problem, every quirk, every breakdown, every fueling experience will be logged and reported back to Chrysler's engineers. Chrysler will pay for all fuel and maintenance. The drivers will pay nothing. The car itself is built specifically for the program. Chrysler designs an elegant 2-door hardtop, a low, modern body penned by the legendary Italian coach builder Ghia in Turin, with build quality at a level the regular American car industry rarely matched. Every turbine car wears a deep bronze metallic paint Chrysler calls turbine bronze, sometimes described as the color of jet exhaust. The interior is finished in matching bronze leather, with chrome and turbine-inspired details, including instruments and trim that visually invoke the cockpit of an aircraft. Under that long hood sits the star, the Chrysler A831 fourth-generation turbine engine. a regenerative gas turbine producing around 130 horsepower and an enormous reserve of torque from the moment it lights off, with a red line running into the tens of thousands of revolutions per minute on the gas generator side. Idle is a soft, jet-like whoosh. Acceleration is uncannily smooth. The car has no transmission shifts in the traditional sense. The behavior is unlike any production automobile of the era. And then there is the fuel flexibility, the most quotable feature of the entire program. The turbine does not care what burns inside it. In Chrysler's public demonstrations, the engineers run the cars on diesel fuel, kerosene, unleaded gasoline of every grade, JP4 jet fuel, and even, for theater, perfume, salad oil, and other improbable liquids. The most famous moment of the entire program comes during a presentation in Mexico City. President Adolfo López Mateos is invited to fuel the car personally. He chooses Tequila. The turbine car starts, idles, and drives without protest. Newspapers around the world print the story. Public interest, predictably, explodes. Tens of thousands of Americans write to Chrysler asking to be considered for the program. The 200 families ultimately selected come from across the country, chosen to represent a range of climates, driving habits, and demographics. In late 1963, the first turbine cars arrive on driveways, and ordinary American families begin a 3-month experience unlike any other in the history of the automobile. The user reports, preserved in Chrysler's archives and quoted across decades of automotive journalism, paint a picture both glowing and revealing. Families love the smoothness. They love the quiet. The turbine car cruises with an eerie absence of the vibration and noise their previous cars produced. They love the heating system, which delivers warm cabin air almost instantly because the turbine itself runs at very high temperatures. They love the showpiece factor, pulling into a gas station and politely asking for diesel or kerosene or whatever happened to be cheapest that week. Draws a crowd every single time. But the reports also surface real-world weaknesses. Fuel economy is the headline problem. Turbines are most efficient at constant high load, and American suburban driving consists almost entirely of stop-and-go conditions where the engine spends a great deal of its life away from its sweet spot. The turbine car drinks fuel of any kind, and it drinks a fair bit of it. Throttle response, despite Chrysler's improvements across generations, still has a hesitation under certain conditions as the gas generator spools up, and the exhaust runs hot. Very hot, which means standing behind a turbine car at idle is an experience drivers learn to remember. There are other issues. Some early units have problems with components stressed by the unique operating conditions, and Chrysler's traveling field service teams collect and repair the cars on a regular schedule. But the broader pattern is clear. The turbine car works. It works as a daily driver, across hot states and cold ones, in cities and on highways, in the hands of families who are not engineers. It is, by any reasonable definition, a successful prototype proving a successful concept. By late 1966, the user program is winding down. Chrysler has gathered an enormous body of data. The engineering team is moving toward a 5th-generation engine that aims to solve the fuel economy and idle issues that the field reports have identified. The path toward an eventual production turbine car, affordable, refined, ready for showrooms, looks genuinely plausible. Here, at the midpoint of our story, comes the question every turbine car fan has wrestled with for 60 years. What went wrong? Why did Chrysler, with a working prototype fleet in customers' hands and a clear development path forward, choose this moment to do something almost unthinkable in product engineering? Gather the cars back and destroy most of them. The answer is part engineering, part economics, and a large, awkward part, federal customs paperwork. Start with the customs paperwork, because this is the part most people leave out. The turbine car's beautiful Ghia-bodies were built in Italy and shipped to the United States as a kind of unusual import. Under American customs rules of the era, items brought in temporarily for testing or demonstration purposes, without being formally and fully imported as commercial goods, could enter under bonded arrangements that avoided the steep duties applied to permanent imports. The Ghia-built turbine bodies were widely understood to have entered the country under exactly such an arrangement. Once the program ended, Chrysler faced a decision. They could pay the full import duties on every Ghia-body in the fleet, duties of significant magnitude, and keep the cars. Or they could remove the cars from existence in a way that satisfied customs requirements and avoid those costs entirely. Combined with insurance and liability concerns about turbine prototypes wandering loose through the American used car market, the calculation tilted brutally toward destruction. In 1967, Chrysler began collecting the user program cars. Of the 50 turbine cars built in total, 55 if you include earlier engineering hardware, the company crushed and destroyed roughly 46 in a process most often described in the surviving accounts as conducted in Detroit, with the bodies cut up, the turbines pulled for further study, and the remains disposed of, with portions reportedly burned. Photographs of the destruction surface from time to time and remain difficult to look at, even for people who never sat inside a turbine car. A small group of cars survived. Chrysler kept several for its own historical and engineering collection. A handful went to museums, including the Smithsonian, the Henry Ford Museum, the Peterson, and the St. Louis Museum of Transportation, under restrictions that, in some cases, included keeping the cars non-operational. 2 cars in private hands joined the small surviving population, with collector Jay Leno later acquiring one of the working examples and returning it to running condition with Chrysler's technical cooperation, one of the very few drivable turbine cars left on Earth. And then, gradually, the corporate appetite for the turbine itself drained away. The first oil crisis of 1973 made any thirsty engine harder to justify. Emissions regulations tightened in ways the turbine's hot exhaust struggled with, particularly on nitrogen oxides. Chrysler itself was running into the financial troubles that would lead to its near collapse and government rescue at the end of the decade. The 5th-generation engine project survived as long as it could, but the moment for the turbine car had passed. George Huebner, who had given decades of his career to the program, eventually retired without seeing his great project reach production. The turbine car research file was, in the broadest practical sense, closed. So what is the final ledger on the Chrysler Turbine Car? 50 Ghia-bodied cars built, roughly 200 American families given a glimpse of a genuinely alternative automotive future. 46 cars destroyed by corporate decision, 9 survivors scattered across museums, and a small number of private hands, almost all of them static, with only a handful that have ever turned a wheel under their own power since the user program ended. The technical legacy is real, even where the product never reached showrooms. Chrysler's turbine research advanced the broader engineering knowledge of small gas turbines in ways that fed back into military, industrial, and aerospace applications. The lessons about multi-fuel operation, low emissions combustion, and high-temperature materials informed work that continues in various forms today, especially as gas turbines find new purposes in modern hybrid and range extender concepts. The cultural legacy is something else entirely. The turbine car has become a kind of automotive folk hero, proof that Detroit, in the years when it still believed in big visions, was capable of putting genuinely radical engineering into the hands of ordinary citizens, and capable of the bureaucratic cowardice to take it away again. The destruction footage has become a touchstone, cited and recited by every generation of car enthusiasts discovering the story for the first time. The car shows up in documentaries, in coffee table books, on the floors of museums where children press their noses to glass cases and try to imagine the sound, and the survivors keep their quiet vigil. Jay Leno's running example occasionally rolls out for events and demonstrations, and the soft, whooshing jet engine signature of the A831 turbine still draws audiences who have never heard anything like it from any production-style automobile. One bronze car, one impossible engine, one brave corporate experiment, and one ending that no Chrysler executive of 1963 would have believed if you had told them in advance. 50 built, 46 destroyed, 9 survivors, and a question about how easily a corporation will undo its own boldest work for the price of a customs bill that has never had a comfortable answer. But while Chrysler was crushing the future, another American car company was about to invent something equally improbable in the opposite direction. the first muscle car, born from an Oldsmobile engineer's stubborn refusal to accept what a sensible engine was supposed to look like. 60 cubic inches bigger than the rules said it should be. It dominated NASCAR before NASCAR had paved tracks. It inspired the first rock and roll song ever recorded, and it set the template every muscle car for the next 20 years would follow. That story is next.